Welcome to METV's series on planning for college. I'm Robin Groel, and it is my pleasure to host these programs designed to assist students and their parents with the transition to college. Our programs bring to you a number of guest speakers who will share their expert advice on finding the right college, preparing for and getting into college, paying for college, and tips for succeeding once you get there. For nearly 30 years, I've had the privilege of counseling students and their parents through the college admissions process. Taking rigorous courses, doing well in them, and succeeding in scoring your best on the SAT or ACT are hallmarks for successful college admission. However, test scores and GPA may only get an applicant to the starting line for admissions consideration. It's in these additional credentials where colleges differ in their approach to an applicant's admissions review. Today's topic is behind the curtain of college admissions. Joining me today are two admissions experts who will help us demystify how colleges decide who to admit, as well as tips on funding a college education. Sonia Wu is Associate Dean of Enrollment Services at New College of Florida here in Sarasota. Jean Wall is Director of College Counseling at Tampa Prep. Jean also has significant experience in college admissions, where she was the former Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Harvey Mudd College in Claremont, California. She was also the Merit Scholarship Coordinator at the University of South Florida in Tampa. Welcome. I have a series of questions that I think we're going to cover, and I hope that you will we'll discuss some of these different topics. I know that today we have seniors who have put in their applications. Many of them are busy working on their applications and the decisions. Some of them have already come in. Some of them are about to come in over the Christmas holidays, and many will be coming in throughout the time that we're in the spring. And there's always a conversation, I know, in schools. I've worked in schools for many years, and the conversation is, well, did you get in, and are you going to go to the college of your choice? And then, of course, the question about merit scholarships and financial aid assistance. And Sonia, I'll start with you if I can. I know you have a lot of experience there at New College, and you are a graduate of New College?
I am. An 85 graduate of New College of Florida, and I've been working in the admissions office reading applications for about 22 years.
Oh my, okay. So you not only put one in, and you had obviously an acceptance, but you've also been helping many, many other students on their journey to New College.
And the process has changed a lot. I mean, it's certainly changed dramatically from filling out a paper application and mailing it off with a request for your transcript and scores. And it's changed a lot, not only from the actual process that happens at the college end, but a whole lot on the student's end.
Mm-hmm. Well, what actually happens in your admissions office after an application arrives?
Well, we use the common application. So when a student applies, they use an application that they can actually submit to roughly 300 colleges around the country, and they submit the same application to any school they choose from that list. They come in electronically for the most part. We still do permit students to mail things, but it does make it harder to get the materials together, so we always prefer an electronic submission. As things come in, because they come in bits and pieces, some parts from the student, some parts from the counselor, once we have the application and the fee on file, we start telling the student what we still need to complete the application. So even though a student hits the submit button and puts in their credit card information for the payment, that's not something that completes the application, and it does take a little time for it to get from there to what is still for us a paper process. So once we have all the information, we start printing it out and putting it into a paper file. So it actually goes to a live human being who's a member of our admissions committee for reading, and then for further review to me or to our Dean of Enrollment Services.
Now, the common application is one that is used by a number of other institutions,
yes.
Is that right? And so now the other state schools here in Florida, the public state schools, do any of those use the common application?
We're the only public university in Florida that uses the common application. So pretty much everyone else just has their own electronic application, and they may still use paper applications, but everyone prefers electronic if it's possible. University of Florida, I think, does only electronic at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jean, you have worked with many applications, I guess on both sides of the desk in your experience. And as you work with students at Tampa Preparatory School, what do you think are some of the tipping points for a successful college applicant?
Well, one of the things you mentioned in the beginning when you were speaking about looking at test scores and grades, I think a lot of students may feel that they need to have a certain test score or grade to get into a college. And that's true when you're looking at competitive colleges. They'll have a very clear mark in terms of GPA and test scores of what you need to get in. But as the schools become more and more selective, one needs to have other things, and those other things are the intangibles. And I like to call those the intrinsic part of the application, and that would be your extracurricular activities, the recommendations, and your essay. So what is it people say about you as a student? How are you going to be a value-added member of that college community? And then what do you have to say about yourself? And that's where you get to really, we say, this is a one time in your life you really need to brag about yourself. You need to blow your own horn. And the other part is, what have you done in high school? Why is that so important? It's because it shows a college that you're willing to be committed or involved in your own high school community. And a lot of students think that, oh, I need to have lots and lots of things. I need to have a long laundry list. Or I hear community service is the buzzword. Don't listen to what anybody tells you. What is the most important thing is to find your passion, to find what you're most interested in. And if that's really one thing, but you've been so committed to that for 4 years, that's really going to stand out, and it's going to make you a very attractive candidate.
Mm-hmm. In working with families over the years, I know that I've had parents as young as elementary school parents come to me and say, should we get started with the college process? I'm very concerned. And we hear stories in metropolitan areas of parents and students trying to get their students into what they consider to be elite or places that you can get the leg up in terms of getting into even nursery school. And in my work, I think that the key is much of what you just said is getting to know yourself. And that process can start as early as middle school in doing community service, doing experiential kind of learning during the summer or during summer breaks, learning how to become responsible. I know a lot of young girls are caretakers and they do babysitting, and I know that when I work with, they say, well, I take care of my younger siblings. Well, that's an important responsibility.
It is.
And in fact, taking care of a child is some of the most responsible work that a person can do. So there's lots of things that a person does that is a good preparation for college. So it is important to take the rigorous courses and to do well, but it's also important to find those things in your own time, your free time, that means something to you. And that process takes time to discover. So getting involved in club activities or community service or sports, travel, doing summer programs.
Or even getting a job. I was attending a college presentation and some of the most selective colleges in the country were there, and somebody raised their hand and said, what do you like to see students do over the summer? And the person from Duke said, I'd like to see students get a job. Getting a job shows that you can take on responsibility. It doesn't have to be anything exotic, but it shows that you can work with people. So that's just one idea. Or be camp. One of my students, she was admitted to an Ivy League school, and people were asking her mother, what does your daughter do that's so extraordinary? She was a camp counselor. But that was something she felt very strongly about, and it meant a lot to her.
Well, I think something that is really helpful to students on the college end when the application's being reviewed is showing true engagement in whatever it is. And it may be something that has a really great and flashy title to it. You may be the president of, the academic bowl team or whatever it might be. But we know that sometimes there are students who have really impressive sounding titles, but the people who are doing the work in the organization are the people who are kind of, more at the ground level. When a student can communicate through the application, whether it's a sort of additional explanation of what their level of involvement was, or through meeting with, emailing, or whatever with the admission counselor at the college end, this is something I do and it's really important to me and here's what I've learned from it. And in the application essay, when they can get across that kind of level of passion and commitment, and it's not just about saying something like, I am passionate and committed about my role in this, but if they can tell it in a way that demonstrates instead of just says it outright, I think that's really a powerful message where I can be at my desk and really be drawn into an essay that's written in a way that sort of, maybe it's telling a story about, and then it sort of brings you to the realization at the same time the student's wrapping up the essay. We get that sometimes with the letters of recommendation, where somebody will say, let me tell you about this student. Here's what happened in class this one day, and how this normally quiet student took a sort of unpopular stand. No one agreed, but got the class talking, and some of the folks changed their mind. And we arrived as a class at a level that was much more interesting than we would have if everyone had just agreed, oh, okay, that's the standard interpretation of this, and let's just move on to the next assignment.
My guess is that, Jean, you have read many essays like that at Harvey Mudd.
I have.
Because when I think about the engineering students that would have applied there, highly selective college, specifically designed for engineering. The types of students who might be applying might not be the ones that are effervescent in their writing style, but yet they needed to be able to articulate something that was meaningful to them in a way that you, as an admissions person, could pick up.
That's correct, and I think one of the things we did every year, we would change our essay questions, hoping to get to that sort of inner part of a student. And I can think of one essay that was always stuck with me, and I always remembered it because it was so much of who that student was. I had the opportunity to interview him prior to reading his application, and he started his essay off with, have you ever heard the story about 1001 Arabian Nights? And in case you haven't, let me tell you the story. It's about a king who actually marries these queens, but he keeps killing them off. And he finally marries this one queen, and she says, okay, I'm going to keep myself alive. And so what she does is she tells a story, and then she says, and you'll hear the rest tomorrow, the next evening. And she continues to do this, and she keeps herself alive. So then he goes into his college essay, wrote it like the standard essay. Hi, my name's Jeff. I really want to be an engineer. I'm an Eagle Scout. And the next paragraph, he's scaling this mountain. He's mountain climbing. He's on these ropes, and you're not sure he's going to make it up the mountain. The next paragraph he goes to, and I'm taking calculus, and I'm a very good student. And the next one, he goes back up to scaling the mountain. And at the very end of his essay, he says, well, I guess the 1001 Arabian Nights idea worked because you said you're still here, aren't you? And it was a very cute essay, and I've always remembered it. But it was very much of who he was. He had sort of this quirky sense of humor, and his quirky sense of humor came through on the essay. That's just one example of an essay you can remember.
I think it's important to think about your audience when you write something. And the reality is you're reading hundreds of essays.
Absolutely.
And so it's important to try to find your voice when you write, so that you know that this is a piece that no one else could have written, and that's conveyed, that there's something about who you are that's been revealed that otherwise they would have not known by looking at your resume or looking at your SAT score.
Sometimes I read an application essay, and it's almost like it's screaming throughout, oh my God, I'm writing my college essay. And the student is clearly thinking, this is what you want to hear. I'd better say it this way, this is what you want to hear, this is what's maybe going to get me into your school. I would tell a student, write about something that is interesting to you. Once you've written it, set it aside. Don't look at it for a while, go back and read it, not just for things like clarity and punctuation, stuff like that, but is it interesting to you to read? Did it really convey what you wanted it to convey? Not, does it say what they want to hear, but does it really have meaning for you? We used to actually have 4 essays, if you can believe that, in our application, and we finally kindly scaled it back to just 1. And the number of book essays we got on the Scarlet Letter, and I only read one where I ever was convinced the student really liked the book, but it was on the AP list, and so people were writing about it because that's what they thought we wanted to hear. That doesn't mean that we would turn a student down just because, great, another Scarlet Letter essay, because we can still learn, can the student write well and convey an idea clearly and so forth. But if it's interesting for us to read, that definitely gives you, in our process, an extra look beyond the rest of the application itself.
So the Scarlet Letter essay probably was something they may have written for a class.
It could have been.
Yeah. So what we always tell
didn't have that tone.
Okay. What we always tell students is we say show, don't tell. And so if you can think about telling a story, that makes it a lot more interesting. The second thing I tell students with this too is, I want you to go in your bedroom at home, shut the door, and read your essay out loud. If it doesn't sound like the way you talk, change it. I said, and that's how I write my recommendations. I literally read them out loud before I send them.
And how important are recommendations?
They can be extremely important. Honestly, some of the recommendations that I read are completely unrevealing, and I think sometimes a student feels like, well, I guess I got to get a letter. I'll go to my guidance counselor. because I waited till the last minute. My English teacher won't do it for me, and she's writing a letter for everyone else in the senior class. But maybe the guidance counselor in some cases doesn't have the time, doesn't know the student well. And for a student who moves, of course, that's really difficult for a student to get the letter of recommendation. But sometimes within the content of the recommendation, you see something that's really revealing. And sometimes that's something that we would find out in no other way. It's not something that the student would say about themselves. It's something that's really kind of special, and it's a personal quality of some kind. It may be about having a passion for helping other people, and here's something that the guidance counselor or the teacher saw happen in the hallway. This happened, and the student stepped up and helped this person out. Or the student led that discussion in class, even though normally this is not someone who would lead discussion. And it may get us at something like a real eagerness for learning that doesn't always come across, especially for a student who's kind of more middle of the road.
I want to add to what Sonia's saying from our side of it is because I work at a school where we do know the students well, the teachers are able to provide a lot of personal anecdotes. But as a counselor, I know the students well, and one of what's really important is that we put the student in context of the school. So when someone in the admission office is reading, they'll understand where this student fits in at our school, and I think that's important to include that as well.
I'm now working with students from lots of different high schools, and I think one of the concerns that some of the parents or students have is that, well, the schools may not know my school, my high school, and so. And that may be true, particularly if a student is choosing to apply out of state. They may be one of 3 or 4 students in their class, or perhaps the first application that particular college has received from that high school. And it's really the college admissions responsibility to look at the profile or look at the school. I know that many college admissions offices have territorial representatives, so that they become kind of experts in that particular region and they get to know those schools. Is that how it worked at Harvey Mudd or at USF?
Yes, at Harvey Mudd, we had areas that we all traveled to, and this is like a lot of the private schools in this country, and public universities do this. You're in charge of a state or a particular part of the state, so one of the things that does happen is that admission people and high school people do forge relationships, so they can pick up the phone and call each other, or can ask questions if something in the application doesn't make sense. It's also our job as counselors to learn what's happening at the colleges and what things have changed, but also it's aside for the admission people to know what's going on at that particular high school. So when they read a student, they can sort of picture them in the environment and say, okay, I can sort of tell that this is a school that's really competitive, and even though the students' grades maybe aren't a 4.0, at this school, having a B average is a really good thing. And where at some schools, the A's are very common, and a B average wouldn't be a good thing. So that's why it's important that they know the particular area, know the schools well.
But at the same time, with when a student maybe is in a situation where the school is not well known to someone else, we're still looking at the individual student, and that's very important for the student to realize so that the student can self-advocate. It might be a case where the student really needs to reach out to someone at the admissions office, and frequently, as you pointed out, somebody is assigned actually to work with that student. One of the things that we consider in our process, I can't speak for how other schools may consider this, but we're interested in whether or not the student is truly interested in our school. We're a small school, and we have to come in on our enrollment target very closely. So one year we were 34 students over, and you would think the world had ended. At some schools they would just rent out a motel and put them up in the motel, but 34 students makes a very big difference at a school of about 800 students. So one of the things students should do is make it very clear, I'm interested in a deep way, not just, oh sure, I'll send you constant emails asking you if you've received my transcript, but find out more about the school, get in behind the scenes if possible. Visiting is something that we consider a very strong indicator of interest. And it's not just the sort of typical group information session and tour, which are kind of the foundation of a visit. We try to get students into the classroom and have lunch with one of our student tour guides so that they can get out of the admissions office a little bit and learn more what their own experience might be like at the school. We actually track every interaction that we have with a prospective student so they can educate us about themselves even if their school is not able to do that for them.
The issue of demonstrated interest, I think, is a big topic of conversation. And I think it's probably, and I want to defer to Jean here, less of a topic of conversation in some of the large state public schools. That's
correct. Yes. I think demonstrated interest is more of followed at private universities that are selective. And if you want to rip back the curtain on this a little bit, there's U.S. News and World Reports that ranks colleges, and one of the criterion that is used is selectivity, meaning how many students do you admit and how many students decide to come. And if you can increase the ratio of the students that you admit that end up coming, which was called the admit rate and acceptance rate, you appear to be more selective. It doesn't mean you're a better school. It just shows that you're more selective. So colleges will track that. On the other hand, it also goes back to the student side, I think, from the college side, saying to students, look, we notice that you're really interested in us, you really want to come, and we'd rather admit somebody that really wants to be here rather than somebody that decided we're number 10 on the list and we're sort of the fallback school, because I think it makes for a better, more happier student body. I don't know if you agree with that,
Well,
Sonia.
and every school has a limited number of resources. Some have more than others, and you have to use your resources wisely. I mean, that's part of being responsible to the college. It's part of being responsible, fiscally responsible to the legislature, in our case. So we do have to consider that, because that goal that we're given by our president, one year we were just 9 students over our goal, and everyone said, oh my gosh, the entering class is so big. And so we have to be very conscious of that and do our best to predict. We run very elaborate weekly reports that compare back for 2 years where we were at that point in the cycle. And everyone is kind of aware. We know students are aware and parents are aware of all those rating things. But what I think is most important for students to think about is, what can I do to show the schools where I'm applying that I'm not only well qualified to be there, but that I understand the school system and that I'll be a happy, productive citizen with them, and really take charge of that process instead of just saying, well, I've gotten this far, I'll send in the stuff and I'll see what happens, because it's a very conscious kind of process that you have to go through.
And I'm talking about demonstrated interest too for anybody that ends up on the waiting list. Some of the times the question comes up, how do I let them know that I really want to be taken off the waiting list? And I think, again, demonstrated interest would be an important component of that. Send them a letter and tell them you're still interested.
I think there's a number of issues that have created this hypersensitivity toward selectivity, and that is the numbers of applications that students are putting out. Jean, do you have a general recommendation for students that, in terms of the numbers, that would make a reasonable number of colleges and yet enough opportunity to know that their choices will come in and they'll have some choice?
Sure. I think I don't necessarily want to give a number. I think if you're applying to too many, and too many depends on what you're looking for instance, if you're a student and a family that needs to be considering merit money or financial aid, you may need to apply to a few more schools because you're not really certain about the financial picture. If you are someone that is looking at selective colleges, it's really, or any student for that matter, it's really important to have the list diversified. So you need to have maybe 1 or 2 schools that are, you'll hear that term reach, meaning it's difficult to determine who gets in there because the school's so selective. Schools that you're pretty sure you're going to get into, maybe you need 1 or 2 of those, and have at least one safety school that no matter what happens, that the student will be happy attending that school. And don't have it on the list if you say, it's on here because it's safety and I don't really like it, but it's because I really like it. That list may be 8, but it may be 10 if you're worried about money. But once you get beyond 10, then it makes the process very difficult for students, because let's say the student gets into all 10, then you have a very difficult decision to make. And so you want to front load the decision part of it, where you've done your research ahead of time and you're happy with your list and you'd be happy in going to any one of the number on the list. Our average where the school I work for is 6. If that kind of gives you a number. And I think you're looking at 6 to 8 is a good number to look at in general.
I think that students often forget that when they press the button for submission and applications, that's only the first step. They have to make sure that all the other components have been received by the school so that a decision can be made. And that's really the student's responsibility to make sure they're looking at their email. Additionally, if they're looking for financial aid, and the majority of students going on to college are need-based aid, they need to follow through with the financial aid office information. And then there are merit scholarships that many of the colleges offer. Some of them require an additional application for a specific type of scholarship, but a lot of merit scholarships just come through by a review of the application. And that's one of the reasons why I tell students that it's so important for them to provide a full context and make sure that their essays are well written, and that if the recommendations are required, that they're in as well, and that they have a very good application, even at their, quote, well, you indicated safety, and I like to use the word likely schools, because they're competing for merit scholarships with that application. And any tips that you might provide, because I know you were doing the merit scholarships there at USF, for merit consideration.
I think the merit consideration piece is the most important thing to do is to figure out how schools do it. There are schools that are the most selective schools out there that don't give any merit money at all. It's all based on need. And one can say they don't need to do merit because if they're accepting less than 10% of their student body, they can shape the class and get whoever they want. But for the schools that are offering merit money, you have to look very carefully at scholarship deadlines. A lot of schools have a priority application deadline, and that can be November 1 or December 1, so you need to check the websites. Secondly, some schools, as you said, have no application attached to that for scholarship, and other schools do.
I can see that our time is coming to an end, and I would like to thank you both very much. Jean Wall at Tampa Prep in Tampa to be with us, and Sonia Wu at New College.
Thank you, Robin.
A college education is the largest investment a person ever makes in themselves. Future programs in this series will cover tips for preparing for college, financing a college education, staying on track with the college application process, and the ever-changing state of college admissions. Thanks for being with us.